The city of L'Aquila, the capital of the region of Abruzzo, is built on a high plain on the slopes of Mount Gran Sasso d'Italia and surrounded by the mountain chain of Laga and the Sirente Massif. According to ancient chronicles, the city was founded in 1254 by Frederick II with the intent of creating an outpost on the border of the kingdom and of unifying the populations of the important centres of Forcona and Amiternum, once Roman municipalities. The city immediately played an important role, placed as it was like a hinge between the Kingdom of Naples, the Church State, and the Duchy of Spoleto. Its position, therefore, favoured the development of its trading and industrial activities. At the end of the 15th century, one of the first printing houses of the peninsula was opened in L'Aquila by Master Adam of Rottweil, a disciple of Gutenberg, the inventor of the printing press, and one of the oldest universities of Italy was founded. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the city, which was politically structured as a free commune, was governed by the quinquevere artium, that is, by 5 upright men chosen by the trade corporations and under the leadership of a camarlengo, as was happening in the more important cities such as Florence and Siena. A witness to this remains in the topography of the city, where still today the names of some of the streets remind us of those ancient corporations: Carders Street, Leather Street, Silkweavers Street, Coppersmiths Street. It was precisely in this period that the city enjoyed the maximum splendor of its craftsmanship, thanks to these corporations and to the flourishing wool trade to which we owe the drawing up of the Statuta Civitatis Aquilae. In this period, other provincial centres also prospered, such as Sulmona, Scanno, and Pesco Costanzo, where today it is still possible to see the typical manufacture of artistic crafts. The work of the goldsmiths of the school of Sulmona was highly appreciated, and various courts and churches, both in Italy and abroad, looked to it for the manufacture of magnificent objects destined for ecclesiastical purposes, such as reliquaries, processional crucifixes, antiphanaries, or jewels. L'Aquila reached such a height of splendor that it was often referred to by Machiavelli and by Guicciardini as the second city of the kingdom, and was usually retained to be a federate rather than a subject by the kings of Naples. For this reason, it had its very own mint, which produced coins for the city. We remember the Bolognino and the Cella, 2 ancient coins of L'Aquila that we see reproduced by Luigi Cardilli, a skillful goldsmith who specializes in numismatic productions. The wealth and prosperity that this part of Abruzzo experienced after the founding of the city is witnessed by the immense wealth of artwork to be found in the urban churches and in the surrounding area. It is sufficient to note, among others, the beautiful collection of wooden Madonnas, the work of local craftsmen, on show at the National Museum of Abruzzo in L'Aquila, which are unique because of their highly original features. Despite the series of political events which placed the city under a succession of different rulers, such as the Angevin, the Aragonese, or the Spanish, and despite the devastation that followed the continual wars that tormented the peninsula, the crafts industry grew and developed, especially those industries related to stock raising, an activity of primary importance in this land. This activity prospered so much that towards the end of the 18th century, L'Aquila had stable trading relations with the largest markets of Italy, for example, Venice, Prato, Florence, Naples, Bari, and Foggia. Also, the rich local patriciate that has left us their numerous noble palaces as a splendid testimony gained its own wealth from activities connected to stock raising. We learn from the book of Teodoro Bonanni of 1888, entitled The Ancient Industries of the Province of L'Aquila, that the more distinguished families owned as many as 60,000 heads of animals each. The wools, which were highly appreciated for their quality, went to the markets of Flanders, Spain, and even to the Orient. In relation to this, it is important to remember the Abruzzi Way, the road that from Florence crossed the Apennines, passed through the province of L'Aquila and reached Naples, and also the herd tracks that allowed the transhumance of the flocks down to the plains of Puglia, creating important trading links and forming a secular bond between Abruzzo and the southern regions of Italy. It is therefore easy to understand why livestock raising was fundamental to the economy of the time, and how, as a consequence, economic production developed that was strictly related to this practice, along with a whole series of related activities and services. Nevertheless, with the development of communications in the 19th century, this activity suffered a decline as soon as imports began of cheaper wool, produced from selected breeds on the new continent. It is then that the province experienced a period of progressive decay which culminated in the fall of the Kingdom of Naples in 1860. This is the date that marks the beginning of the phenomenon of highway robbery and the social evil of emigration, which impoverished these areas. From then until the post-war years, the small industries survived as a support activity or service, creating, nonetheless, a web of small firms that were very important in maintaining the local economy and the levels of occupation. Among these, the firms that were related to traditionally typical artistic sectors have held a very important position. One of the oldest crafts in the land of Abruzzo is that of stone dressing. Even today, we can still find around the city of L'Aquila and in the older centers of the Peligna Valley some craftsmen who still hand down archaic working methods and who carry out their work using simple instruments. Limestone from Mount Morone is one of the most used materials, especially by the craftsmen of Pacentro. But in L'Aquila, we find a harder stone coming from the ancient quarries of Vigliano. This is the stone used to build the facade of the Basilica of Colle Maggio and in the building of other splendid churches in L'Aquila. This stone stands out for its particular golden hue, which, when combined with the red stone taken from the quarries of Genzano and Roio, today no longer in existence, gives a particular flavor and a rare beauty to the monuments. The forms most employed in architectural decorations are those that are traditional to Abruzzo, motifs depicting animal and plant life. These decorations, starting with the splendid rose windows which adorn the churches, are characterized by their constructive and stylistic simplicity. A characteristic for the most part still maintained today, having undergone no drastic transformation in the course of the centuries. Therefore, we find craftsmen employed in stone dressing in Poggio Picense and in Tornimparte, where the important Sarra plant has been set up to exploit the most important and oldest quarries of the area. Precisely the use of modern machinery allows a more rational use of the stone blocks. We also find a whole series of craftsmen and sculptors that work around this firm. With the aid of modern technology, but still relying on the ingenuity of man, they produce authentic works of art, especially those that are designed as complementary manufactures for the building industry and architecture. This craft was imported to the area from Lombardy. Famous stone dressers from Como arrived in L'Aquila in the 14th century during the city's first period of prosperity. In the historical center of L'Aquila, there is still Lombard Street, in memory of the presence of these craftsmen in the city. The art of stone dressing spread early to Scanno and later on to Pesco Costanzo, where it was to reach its highest expression in the 16th and 17th centuries, as can be seen by observing the splendid abundance of altars designed by the great architect Fanzago and carried out by local craftsmen. We can see similar examples in St. Mary of Collimaggio and in St. Bernardino of Siena, where, besides the splendid altars, we also note the two magnificent mausoleums, in which are laid the remains of St. Bernardino and of St. Pietro Celestino V, masterpieces of the sculptors Girolamo of Vicenza and Silvestro Aquilano, clearly influenced by Donatello. The art of building and repairing pipe organs is a very old craft, and one which may be classed among those which are disappearing. The organ builders of the province of L'Aquila are to be found in Torre de' Nolfi of Bugnara, where a renowned firm that has ancient roots, now owned by the Bevilacqua brothers, is still occupied in the restoration and building of new pipe organs. The work is done completely by hand, following a ritual of ancient gestures and without the use of electronic instruments. Thus, it is the ear of the craftsman which decides if the organ pipes have the correct sound. And, above all, the very pipes are made using traditional methods which go back to the Renaissance. The production of this firm is destined for the markets of Italy and abroad, where it is called to undertake important restoration work. The great organ in the Paul VI Hall in the Vatican was built by these craftsmen of the organ. The craftsmanship of copper is very old. We find references to coppersmiths already in 1400 in L'Aquila, where one of the streets of the centre, Coppersmiths Street, reminds us of this ancient corporation, which grouped together all those who worked non-precious metals. We have to remember that in times past, copper was widely used to produce kitchenware and utensils for domestic purposes. Consequently, this tradition remained very much alive in L'Aquila up to the last century. Nowadays, this art is entrusted to the hands and creative genius of a few very worthy craftsmen, among whom Dora Arduini and Tiberio Raimondo. In our day, the crafting of copper, brass and iron is used to produce complementary architectural manufactures for civil and ecclesiastical projects. The manual ability and the creative genius of the craftsman are of fundamental importance in this area, in order to manufacture a product which marries artistic prestige to quality and functionality. The works of Master Cola of Ofena, his proper name being Nicola Lancioni, are still famous in local memory and also beyond the regional boundaries. He was a brilliant smith who worked in the last century up until the 70s in the charming town of Valle del Tirino. His works of rare beauty and high technique are to be found in the most important public and private collections and also in the Basilica of St. Bernardino in L'Aquila. Among the ancient corporations that governed the city, the Gold and Silversmiths Corporation was very important. The crafting of gold and silver is a very traditional activity in this area of Abruzzo. We remember the school of Sulmona, which from the 14th to the 16th centuries spread its splendid masterpieces throughout the world to all the courts and to the more important churches. Today, beside the manufacture of filigree, we also find the manufacture of embossed silver, which, decorated with enamel paints, is shown to be an authentic work of art in its own right. The monuments of Abruzzo and the more spectacular aspects of its landscape come to life again in the splendid objects created by Mario Cavallo. The manufacture of gold and silver artifacts has experienced a renewal, while still following tradition, as can be seen in the work of goldsmith Enzo Imprescia of L'Aquila and in the work produced by the firm of Knight Armando di Rienzo of Scanno. Today, thanks to the abilities acquired in the State Institutes of Art and to apprenticeships served in the older goldsmiths' workshops, many goldsmiths have opened up in all the larger centres of the province in reply to the increased demand. In the towns of Scanno, Pesco Costanzo, Castel di Sangro, Avezzano, Sulmona, L'Aquila and Pratola Peligna, we find goldsmiths that by frequenting the numerous professional trade fairs and by keeping up to date, manage to manufacture a high-quality product while still respecting the traditions of the craft. This workmanship is almost completely done by hand, and we can see that there is no mechanization. These artistically refined objects are highly appealing because of their exquisite design and elegance. The workmanship of leather for the production of saddles seems a relic from the past. Nowadays it isn't easy to see horses, therefore few imagine that there is still a type of economy related to these animals. And yet, in L'Aquila, in a typical narrow street in the historical centre, we find this old workshop of the De Santis brothers that has been working for more than 50 years in the manufacture of saddles and harnesses, which are appreciated both in Italy and abroad. They are exported even to England, where they have found their way into the royal stables. The choice of strictly traditional materials and the methods of production with all the finishing done by hand make these products objects of the highest quality in great demand in all markets. The manufacture of bobbin lace or pillow lace is a very old tradition, but it has almost completely disappeared. The lace produced with this implement, called a tombolo, is very refined and of a much sought-after quality. In L'Aquila, recently new firms have opened that are occupied in this manufacture, but many are still to be found in Sulmona, Scanno and Pesco Costanzo, where this traditional activity is quite prosperous. We should remember that especially during the winter months, when there was less work in the fields, the women gave themselves with a passion to this work. At the same time, the men created designs which were then transformed by capable feminine hands into precious embroideries, which can still be admired today in the churches and in the fine noble houses of Abruzzo. Woodworking or cabinet making is still quite widespread, especially in the interior areas where numerous carpentry workshops produce frames and furniture. This production, so typical of the area and destined to help the small building trade, even though aided by the use of highly technological equipment, stands out because of its particular characteristics of solidity, sturdiness, strength and precision, and because of the individual flavor that these artifacts have because they are not mass-produced. Mostly local woods are used, such as the national walnut, cherry wood, chestnut, beech wood, and other woods that grow in this environment. The end result is truly remarkable. The manufacture of ceramics is widespread throughout the territory. We find excellent ceramists in Pacentro, Sulmona, Castel di Sangro, Avezzano, Intro d'Acqua, Massa d'Albe, and also in L'Aquila. With keen foresight, the Franciscan Fathers in 1961 opened a ceramics laboratory, the Sant Bernardino of Siena, exploiting some laws which were designed to encourage the crafts industries. This pottery is still operating after 40 years and has a remarkable production with a characteristic style which distinguishes it from other pottery centres of Abruzzo, such as Castelli, Rapino and Villamagna. At present, these potteries succeed in meeting the internal demand and constitute a truly outstanding element in the vast panorama of typically traditional crafts of the province. The ceramics of Sara Galterio in Pacentro deserve a special mention. She specializes in the production of figurines that compose the Christmas nativity scene. The figures of differing sizes are produced using ancient molds made at the beginning of the last century, evocatively modeled and inspired by the ancient costumes of our shepherds. Sulmona, although famous throughout the world for being the birthplace of Ovid, is also renowned for the important tradition in the production of comfits or sugar almonds. This is an ancient activity which goes back to 1400 and which still today is carried out in the traditional manner. What makes it so special is not only the traditional method of manufacture, but also the way in which it is then artistically packed and presented. The sugar almonds are covered with thin paper of various colors, and with these, flower, animal, and plant shapes are formed. This type of production, which is peculiar to Sulmona, is nowadays exported all over the world, and it guarantees the employment of a large workforce involved in this unique and peculiar sector. One of the ancient streets of L'Aquila is called Carder's Street, named after the workmen of that ancient corporation which grouped together precisely all those that carded, spun and wove the wool from the flocks of the province of L'Aquila, and which had the government of the city for about 3 centuries. Today it is only in Sulmona that we find the still prosperous activity of loom weaving for the manufacture of artistic blankets, carried out by the small firm of the Santarelli brothers, which exports its products to many countries. Today's manufacture is carried out on power looms, but it still has the same characteristics of the cloth worked on the old treadle looms. The chromatic effects of these beautiful blankets, which are manufactured in Sulmona, are inspired by the typical colors of our land: the blue of the sky, the dark green of the meadows and the woodlands, and the red of the fire. It is with the economic recovery of the 1960s, therefore, that the small industries of L'Aquila received new impetus and new strength, so much so that at the moment there are about 7,200 firms registered on the provincial list, with more than 16,000 employees. These cover all areas of civilian life: car repairs, building, electronics, food industry, services. The whole system of the national parks, which are so important in Abruzzo, and the newfound delight of rediscovering the interior areas of Italy, have made possible the vital recovery of the typical traditional arts and crafts, which are a testimony to the past splendor of a fascinating and varied world. Crafts that today still represent the spearhead of development in this province's ever-expanding economy.